This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.
And now, here's a word from our sponsor.
Spartacus Coffee is made for and made by hustlers, entrepreneurs, peak athletes, self-starters, and free thinkers. Our community of coffee drinkers believe in lifting each other up to be the best version of ourselves we can be. On top of that, every sale goes to the nonprofit organization No Kid Hungry, a national effort to end childhood hunger in America. To learn more about that and order some of the best, richest coffee you can find at an affordable price, go to SpartacusCoffee.com and be sure to use my promo code. It's pretty simple. It's Burke, which is JAYBURKE, and get 10% off your first order. Remember, Spartacus Coffee. We fuel the grind, we fuel the success, we fuel champions. We are Spartacus.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
World War II wasn't just a conflict. It was the crucible where the modern world was forged. Hammered forward by advancements that reshaped both battlefields and daily life alike. But these innovations came at an unimaginable price. The cost? Between 70 and 85 million lives. Roughly 3% of the global population at the time. Progress has rarely demanded such a staggering toll. The war's climax exposed humanity's dual capacity for creation and destruction in ways previously unthinkable. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay flew 6 miles above Hiroshima as the city stirred to life. Rumors had swirled about why Hiroshima had mostly been spared from earlier bombings that targeted some of the most industrious Japanese cities. There were whispers of U.S. immigrants being there, or even a connection to President Truman's family. But at 8:16 a.m., those whispers became irrelevant. In an instant, Hiroshima ceased to exist. The bomb obliterated 48,000 buildings, damaged 70,000 more, and left survivors describing a desolate silence. A once thriving city turned to ash. Just 3 days later, Nagasaki suffered a similar fate. In just 4 days, an estimated 140,000 people perished in Hiroshima and another 74,000 in Nagasaki. The aftermath was apocalyptic. Fires raging through ruins, bodies buried in debris, and survivors mutilated beyond recognition. Thriving cities became barren wastelands in the blink of an eye. And yet, the argument persists that this was a mercy. Japan was a brutal enemy, its surrender seemingly unreachable. The bombings, it said, saved countless lives, forestalled Soviet invasion, and ended the fire bombings and blockades that would have left millions starved and dead across the country. But those arguments are weighed against the hellish scenes left below in the aftermath. And that's not to mention what the following generations would endure. See, war is the ultimate contradiction. It asks us to save humanity by setting aside our own. And those of us looking back with hindsight sit in the luxury of what others before us were willing to sacrifice in order to gain that luxury. The atomic bombs didn't just end the war. They ushered in a new era, one where humanity must forever grapple with its own ability to both create and destroy on an unfathomable scale. Nearly 80 years later, we still live in the shadow of that moment. That day wasn't just history. It was a blueprint for the world we know now. And the question lingers for those of us born in its aftermath. Was the decision to drop the bomb justified? It's a question that me and my good friend Brandon from FDR's wheelchair grapple with. But find out for yourself in an episode I'm calling Atomic Decisions, Revisiting the Ethics of the Bomb. It won't always be a straight line.
It won't always be a straight line.
It won't always be a straight line.
But take the journey.
Take the journey.
Take the journey.
And escape a while for thoughtful excursions
Into the world of ideas across media,
politics, technology,
Pop culture.
and all realms of civic life. Take the journey.
Take the journey.
Take the journey.
Take the journey. Take the journey.
Take the journey.
You're listening to The With J. Burke Show. Hello and welcome to The With J. Burke Show. My name is Jason Burke, and though I'm technically the host of this podcast, it's the guests who truly take top billing. This is a place for curious minds who enjoy civil and sometimes meandering conversation. If you appreciate a few laughs and want to come away with new knowledge about subjects that aren't always easy to break down, then you're the person I want listening to this podcast. Today, I'm excited to have Brandon, one of the two minds behind FDR's wheelchair, join us. And honestly, this is one of my favorite podcasts because these guys have a way of cutting through the noise by blending sharp political commentary with just the right amount of humor to make sense of the whole thing, of the whole mess, I guess. But obviously, you've been here before, and Dave couldn't make it, but Brandon, welcome back.
I'm back again.
Yeah.
One of these days, Dave will actually make it onto your show.
He's gonna, yeah. You know what though? I was like, he's gonna yell at me for what we're talking about today.
Yeah, he likes to yell at people. He yells at me pretty much every week. So
yeah. So just I guess I should. Well, I mean, by the time this comes out, people will read the title, so they should know what the hell's going on. But we're going to dive into one of the more controversial decisions in modern American history, which was the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan. I remember listening to your show, and Dave was very passionate about his lack of support for it. I just always remembered that.
yeah, he was very much against dropping the atomic weapons. And just a fun fact for the FDR wheelchair fans. Our first show was about this, but we drank 3 bottles of wine and we couldn't air it because we weren't able to really have a cognitive conversation about it.
I can't even imagine, because your first podcast is always weird. Like mixing those 3 elements together. A couple bottles of wine, first time doing the podcast, and the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, it spiraled very quickly. Well, not very quickly, because we went out to dinner, we had a bottle of wine, we came back and we had 2 more bottles of wine, and we were drinking a bottle of wine during the show. So there was one point Dave looked at me and said, "What's the topic?" I was like, "Yeah, we're not going to air this," but now we did a later show where I actually got to express our views, express the facts and whatnot. And Dave was very much for not dropping the bomb. And I kind of played devil's advocate about dropping the bomb.
Right.
There's 2 different sides. So
where do you stand on that?
I lean
right into it.
Yeah. Wait till like kind of, let me lube me up basically. The more I look into it, the more I feel that it was the wrong decision, but I don't begrudge the decision because at the time it was a different world. We didn't really understand atomic weapons. We didn't really understand the devastation they caused, and the sentiment of the American people is we've been at war for 4 years. The world had been at war for longer than that. The Japanese Army and Navy were a scary foe. This wasn't just we're fighting for some territory in the Middle East. We're fighting for oil. We're fighting for something that's untangible. We were fighting for Western civilization, so to speak. So we beat the Germans, and then we face another front where it could take longer. And that aspect of it where you have a weapon that could immediately end the war and not use it seems in a way kind of affront to the people that were joining the war effort to not use it. So I understand that idea, but what we did was a war crime. What the atomic weapons did, the bombing of Hiroshima, even more so, but bombing of Nagasaki, that was a military complex city, but still it killed over 100,000 civilians.
Yeah. It was like, or maybe I'm thinking of Hiroshima, like 90% of it was civilians rather than
Hiroshima was much more civilian. Nagasaki had the weapons manufacturing and stuff. But even then, at that time, the Japanese homeland had become so embargoed that it wasn't very effective. You also had the threat of the Russians coming to town to claim back their islands that the Japanese stole. So in a way, it wasn't really necessary looking back on it. I mean, hindsight's 2020, of course. But so you had the American military who had victory after victory after victory. And you had the Russians coming to town going, yep, we have 6 million still, army still occupying Germany. We can just transfer them with our newly developed trains right over. They'll be there in like a couple of weeks. I mean, Stalin had industrialized the entire of Russia, including Siberia and Manchuria and whatnot. So they could be there within weeks, and it was a veteran hardened army already. So, and he didn't care about casualties, so it wouldn't have been an issue for Stalinistic Russia. So the Japanese, they were kind of at a desperate edge, and it was more of the leaders trying to protect the emperor that were hardline. But
yeah,
in a way, I guarantee you, after 2 months of starvation, they would have changed dramatically.
So it's funny. I should have lubed you up. You you took a lot of my points there. All right, so I'm just.
When you come at me like this is what I respond with.
I was about to go like, all right, well, the show is over, and you did everything. You laid it out very nicely. We had a longer talk before the show started. No, so I'm gonna
buy me dinner and a glass of wine before you jump straight into it, buddy.
No, so God, it's so funny.
Let's break down the ideas.
Well, so let me do that. I'll tell you. Here's where I came at. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said absolutely justified bombings, just for a number of factors. I do look at it more, and I could see, like you said, once I knew they were embargoed, I was like, I still have trepidation saying it's not justified more than it wasn't necessary. I don't know. It wasn't necessary. We would have won no matter what. But
right.
I look at the same thing you're talking about. I look at the time, and I imagine being somebody living in that time. And you could theoretically say, if I'm like 50 years old, right? So it's not yet 19. I've been through 2 world wars now in the last 30 years. I've seen so much catastrophic death and destruction. This needs to stop. And
the fighting in the Pacific was extraordinarily brutal.
That was, yes. People don't really realize it. So the European theater Hitler gets all the glory of World War II. There's just not a better way to say that. I don't mean it as like in a good way, but like the Germans get all of the, let's say headlines, because I mean, Hitler is, we were talking about this on I don't know. I was talking about this maybe I feel like one of the podcasts we were talking about, but there's a true line, but like of good and evil in that war. Not saying we did everything right or the British did everything right or the Russians, but what Hitler wanted to accomplish, everybody, 95% of the world agrees was evil, what he tried to do. So there's a defining line of good and evil. Also, not a lot of people know about like pre-war Japan from like 1929 on, but they did some terrible shit too. But
Hitler was trying to invade Europe, and you're not allowed to do that.
You can't.
Ever since Napoleon.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. No, but I look at that, I say like, all right, if I'm an older person, I've seen 2 of these now. We've lost a lot of military men as far as the American side, right? So, and the Pacific is, like you said, I mean, it's gruesome. Japan has showed, I think, I want to say in Okinawa and somewhere else, Iwo Jima, that we lost a lot more men than we thought we would, because they would resort to suicide bombings or
last stand
tactics.
They called it the Bushido effort, or the Bushido Code, which was to die to the last man. They wouldn't surrender. It was seen as a disgrace against the emperor.
Right.
However, that was starting to give in. You had the kamikazes afterwards, like when they were coming close to the mainland Japan. But even then, the kamikaze was like, we don't want to do this.
Like, this thing is over.
It's like, this is not good. The families of the kamikaze pilots were like, what is this? What are we doing? It's not effective. It's not samurai. It's not Japanese. It is sending our children to death. There was a big sentiment of that. However, again, we know this because of hindsight.
Right.
The U.S. government at the time, or the U.S. military at the time, were like, no, they're just dive bombing us now. They're running us with samurai swords. We have to kill these people. We have to destroy them wholesale, because we need a surrender. Not just like a surrender with shoot, I forget the
with oh my god,
I can't think of it.
I don't know why I can't remember the easiest thing, because I put like, I'm like, remember all this hard shit, like dates and stuff, and then I go,
yes.
I want to say elements, but that's
no. Well, you're getting closer.
With,
but, unconditional surrender.
Conditions was the word I was getting to. Element to condition.
Elements. We got there. An unconditional surrender.
I'm definitely keeping it.
Great. So they needed an unconditional surrender, just like they had with Germany, and the people at the top of the Japanese government and military did not want to do that, because they wanted to keep the emperor sacred, or so they told the public. What it was, they wanted to still keep in power.
Yeah, which I thought was funny, because we end up keeping the emperor anyway. That was like the sticking point, that they didn't want them coming to that was Potsdam, right? I think.
Yeah. Well, the issue with that was we kept the emperor in power to humiliate him. And to subjugate the people. See, this is what the American empire can do to your emperor. Can I just give you a quick aside on something that I always found amazing with this? I was watching a special where the generals were talking about keeping them in power. And this is like the height of the second Iraq war. So it's probably 2005, 2006. And literally one of the generals goes, we were okay with the emperor being there because you need to have some sort of figurehead. He goes, we weren't interested in fighting multiple insurgencies for years to come. And I was like, motherfucker, didn't anybody ever talk to like George? Like, wasn't Dick Cheney like alive for this? He's got to be 150. like, he never read a book that said that. Like, I just remember watching that. So anyway, that was an aside. Yeah. And that was kind of thing to keep the Japanese people united. And like I said, they want to humiliate them. They want to subjugate the people of Japan because they'd just been through a brutal fucking war. And they wanted to, like, you took the Philippines from us. You took Manila. You took Malaysia. This was supposed to be our empire. And you bombed Pearl Harbor. You did this to us. Now look, the big boys have shown up and this is what you get. And I think there was a lot of that mentality, especially with Truman and especially with the military generals, especially MacArthur, who didn't want to stop the war at Japan. He wanted to go through China with nuclear weapons and invade China.
Yes. He didn't want to stop till, was it MacArthur who said he just wanted to get to like the heart of the Soviet Empire and just stick it back?
Well, Patton was also.
Patton might have said that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Patton wanted to keep rolling through Europe to go to the Soviets. MacArthur wanted to nuke China, especially after the Korean War. So yeah, you had these kind of bloodthirsty generals.
Yeah.
Who were magnificent in what they did, but again, bloodthirsty.
Yeah, I mean, just watching some of these specials. So I'd been watching a Netflix show, Turning Point, about the bomb and then the Cold War and stuff. And what I realized is like the generals and like the leaders of like the CIA or whatever you want to call it, they're all fucking sociopaths. Like,
yes, they are
psychopaths. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but that's who would be good in a situation like that. That's needed, I guess, in some way. But
have you ever watched the movie Heartbreak Ridge?
No, I know what it is. Oh, well, I've heard of it, but
yeah. So it's Clint Eastwood. He's a Marine gunnery sergeant, and he's training Marines to go to Grenada. Is what he's doing, and he's a hard ass. He's a sociopath, very much so. But one of his officers tell him that he should be put in a glass box, and it says "break only in time of war." That's what these generals at that time needed. Like, well, we're at war, break the glass and let them out, and then we have to put them back in the glass.
No, it's true. I mean, some of them, I don't want to say, like, I feel bad if anybody in the military is listening.
Oh,
there's
Eisenhower
like
was
great
fairly
people.
restrained.
Yeah, there's
Omar Bradley. And
I mean, it was definitely, listen, World War II is a war that's just different from any other war. You know, even World War I is weird. It was just like, everybody got a bunch of weapons and we're like, hey, you shoot. You shoot first. Yeah.
They're running at us, and we have a gun that shoots 300 bullets a minute.
Then some obscure Duke gets shot, and they're like, what do all these treaties say again? Let's just start shooting. We have
right. Time to build the trench.
Yeah. Yeah, World War II is much different. But World War II is like an extension of the First World War, and the First World War is like an extension of like, you know, the other wars.
The colonial wars, especially in Africa, the Belgians and the French and the British who tried to take everything, and the Germans were like, hey, we want to do that too. And they were like, no, you can't. And they were like, oh, okay. Well, and then the Dutch were over off in Asia. Yeah, it's complicated. That's a whole mini series right there.
Yeah, I mean, they all connect. I mean, actually, your first World War is, I think, the French and Indian War is technically like a world war. Whenever I read, and Washington, I want to say, is involved in that one. That's the one you're talking about, I think. More or less. Yeah.
They some historians call it the First World War.
Yeah,
and a lot of people call it Napoleon's War on Europe, one of the First and Second World War. But
yeah. So
we digress.
Yeah. So getting back to it. Now, so I look at that, like the points you're making, and I totally see them. And I totally agree. But like, I also put myself there, and then I think about, I'm like, all right, we have them blockaded. Their navy's gone. Their navy's decimated.
Oh yeah.
The Russians are ready to knock on the door.
Oh, they were itching to knock at the door.
Well, I mean, they wanted influence. Yeah.
They wanted their islands back.
That's again, history kind of like, this is where it all ties together. Yeah. So they lost those islands in China in 1905 in the
the Russo-Sino War. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
Where they got their ass kicked.
Yeah.
So and Stalin was around for that. So he remembers.
Yeah.
That motherfucker holds a grudge.
But I do wonder, like, would it be better to starve the whole population from, like, I don't know if that's necessarily a great outcome, and then wait for the Soviets to come down and take what they want. Because everybody knows, you could say what you want. Everybody ran from from East Europe. They tried to get to the West because the Soviets were so brutal.
that's a very valid point that I actually wanted to bring up, because the Soviets did a scorched earth policy, people that they were at war with. And with the history between Russia and Japan, that could have been even more deadly. And then you have the American B-29 strategy of just firebombing cities. So Tokyo, they firebombed Tokyo, which actually killed more people than Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
Yeah.
So they would have continued that. So it says killed around 125,000 people.
I did read they would have continued the fire bombings, which, again.
Oh, absolutely.
Again, you want to go to a war crime. The fire bombing of Dresden is.
In
Germany.
that was
that was only a few months before, too. I think that was in February of 45.
Yeah. Slaughterhouse 5. That's a great book to read about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, these countries have been pushed so far into war that firebombing or just demolishing a city didn't seem inappropriate.
Well, that was one of the justifications. We were in a total war. Total war is different than regular war. Total war means we're going to basically decimate them until there's nothing left and they're forced to surrender. And then it gets weird because even in Germany, I mean, you're right. We did a lot of that stuff. And so did obviously the Brits and everybody else. The idea was factory workers make bombs. Factory workers make the parts to make bombs. They're fair game. Even though they're not a military installation anywhere. They're in a city with innocent people. They're a part of the mechanism. We can bomb the shit out of them. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's total war.
And you're talking about Dresden as well. I mean, the people of London would have been like, fuck yeah, we're bombing the shit out of every German city. Are you kidding me? We've lived in a subway system for 3 years. No, destroy them all. And you could understand that. So you have the American generals seeing this, and then the brutal campaigns that they're fighting in the Pacific, and you have a bomb that could decimate one city with one plane, and you're going, maybe we shouldn't do that. In some ways, in their minds, it would be hard to put that equation together.
Yeah, I guess that's where I side on that justification. I just always think about being around at that time. I will say this about the American public. I mean, I think 85% agreed with it right after. Once they saw the devastation, I think there was a New York Times article that came out a year later. You saw the opinion totally start to change in regards to those two bombings and even nuclear warfare moving forward. Americans, they didn't realize the devastation up close. You could see it, you saw the bomb drop and you saw how crazy it was. But if you're, when you see the stuff on the ground, it's
yeah. And again, I think it's a misunderstanding of what the atomic weapons were actually about. It's oh, it's a big bomb. Oh, it's going to last for 50 years.
Yes.
Oh, it's going to wipe out everything.
Right.
It's different from a firebombing where you firebomb it and everything burns and you have a chance to react, to escape, whatever. But this just eradicated an entire city in one bomb, which I don't think was explained to the public.
I don't think it was.
I don't think it was even explained to Harry Truman. Yeah. Yeah.
Truman changed. I know publicly what he had to say. What he felt like he had to say. He had to support it, and he had to say it was the right thing to do when he was getting questioned. He had a lot of internal struggle about it once he realized the devastation. In fact, in the special I was watching, they said that, you want to talk about sociopaths. I mean, the military planners were just going to keep dropping them. They were just going to keep dropping them if they didn't surrender. So let me go back because I don't know if everybody knows. August 6, 1945, we dropped the first atomic bomb, the little boy on Hiroshima that kills 80,000 instantly. And then tens of thousands more died from radiation exposure in the following months. They don't surrender. So then on August 9th, we dropped a second atomic bomb called the Fat Man on Nagasaki, which killed, I think it was less. It would eventually exceed like 70,000, but right away it was 35, 40,000. Truman, after the second bomb, got like a note basically saying the third one will be ready on the 18th, but now we can move it up to the 12th. And Truman got this, in a typed up letter to himself, and he signs like the bottom. He goes, "No atomic weapons will be dropped unless my command is given." He wrote it much more presidential than I just explained it, but but they said since then the atomic bomb's been tied, or nuclear weapons is tied to the presidency. Because right before that, the military had absolute disclosure of when to use it. And he stepped in and said, no way. Because, he was told these were military installations. These are military targets. He didn't realize how much of the civilian population was going to be affected. So once he saw the pictures and stuff, I think he changed his mind a little bit. But he wasn't ready to drop the third one. I know they said they gave him a lot of pressure, and he changed his opinion before they were dropped. He said, this is a weapon of war. And afterwards, he's like, this is something totally different. I don't know what it is, but it's not a weapon of warfare.
Yeah. After his diaries were released, he was very, very for it and very against it at the same time. He was very ambivalent on the effects of the nuclear weapon. And you can see that in his writing, and you can see it in the pressure of war, and you can see it from the pressure from his generals. His generals were like, fucking just total the country. We don't care. However, I often wonder what FDR would
I was
do.
going to ask you guys that.
I
think he doesn't have anything like explicitly written, but I was going to ask you guys what you thought.
I think FDR would have, I don't know. I go back and forth. I think FDR could have dropped the bombs or dropped a bomb. I think maybe he might have made a bigger show about it. Maybe not on the homeland, maybe on an island.
So that was one of the, somebody did write that, like, we didn't have to do it because we had the blockade. We were going to win no matter what happened. We could have just told them, hey, watch this, and dropped it on an island that had no people on it. And just, you see the effect of this. This is what's going to come.
Yeah. And then I've heard arguments that if we told them like, hey, watch this at this time, they would have shot the plane down. But again, if we dropped it on an island, we had pretty much air supremacy.
At that point, yeah.
And it would have been easier for the planes, like, cause they were going over the mainland, which still had anti-aircraft going over an island. But would the Japanese actually have seen it? Would they have realized the devastation?
I don't think they would have surrendered, though. If they didn't,
I don't think so either. Right,
like,
right.
You didn't kill anybody with that. Yeah, I mean, I just think
come do it over here, guys.
Yeah, I dare you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It would have been interesting to say.
I don't think the higher command of the Japanese military would have surrendered over a show of force. I think the only way that they would have surrendered over the bomb was to drop it, like we saw. However, did we need to drop it? So there's the military at the time said it would take 3 months and over 400,000 casualties to invade the homeland of Japan.
Right. That was Operation Downfall.
Yes.
Operation Downfall. 2-stage invasion. They were going to invade Kyushu in November of 44.
Which is, Kyushu is what Russia, well, so this doesn't involve Russia, this operation. So Russia would have come in and they wanted Kyushu.
Yeah.
So that's 6 million people on their brand new trains.
Well, he was chomping at the bit. He rushed because so when we were on more friendly terms, they agreed. So here's another thing that makes me wonder about it too. The other problem that we have is, right, so Japan's responsible for getting us into the war. They obviously went to Pearl Harbor and did what they did. Roosevelt knows, though, the real war is in Europe. Germany didn't really attack us, but the impetus is there. Now we can get involved. And he knew at some point we had to get involved. He couldn't say it publicly, obviously.
Right.
So when you talk about how bad the fighting was, it's also because we were just so focused on the European front that basically the Asian theater was like, keep it steadfast until we're ready. You know what I mean? Like, I think they also got a little more fierce fighting than they anticipated.
Yeah. And it was with the Marines too, which Marines are known for being a little more brutal than the rest of the military.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, the agreement is like, yeah, we're going to overthrow Hitler with you. And then all you guys, the allies, are going to come and we're going to overthrow Japan together. But that doesn't happen because Great Britain has been decimated. Their cities are decimated from the Blitzkrieg and just 4 years of warfare and bombardment. They basically have no money. They spent so much money, they're deep in debt. And then the French, they helped us on D-Day, some of them, like half of the country. But they're politically a mess and their military is a mess and their whole country is a mess because, they had Vichy France.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just going to keep all this shit in. I always cut it so people are like, God, he never makes a mistake. They had Vichy France, which if anybody doesn't know, that's when Germany went in there, they installed their own puppet government. That's what it was called. It was basically.
Yeah. And a lot of them were hanged.
Yeah.
After the war. So Britain spent it. Yeah. It spent 4 years holding out the tide of Hitler for the world's benefit. The Americans are at their peak.
Yep. They're
war hardened now. Their industry is going. The Russians are at their peak. They have an insane amount of manpower.
People is like, didn't they lose 20 million people in that war or something?
26. Yeah.
He's just like.
They won the war on the East Front.
It's true though. Without them, I
it would have
know
been
what
different
Europe
war.
looks like.
Exactly. So they have this war hardened military that is chomping at the bit to get back the Russo-Sino War. So that's going to collapse on Japan. You still have China, which is still ally friendly, and then you have a resurrected Southeast Asian front. You still have the Australians and the New Zealanders that are willing to fight. And then you have America that's about to pull their army, which just defeated Nazi Germany, to help the Marines and the Navy win the war in the Pacific. So all this is collapsing in on the Japanese. And then they get an atomic bomb dropped on them. It's like
just for good measure.
Hey, we're going to kick your ass, but we're going to like destroy a couple of cities in the process with 2 bombs. So,
So part of that rationale, when I look back at it, it's like, okay, we have no help. We have no help.
They're completely isolated. They're embargoed.
We do have help. But I'm saying as far as the American, we have help, but it's the help we don't want. It's the Russians can help us.
Russia.
Yeah, we'll help you in a second. We're just going to do what we did in Berlin and split that shit in half. And
exactly. So Russia's like, just as you said, we're going to split that stuff in half. Like, give us part of Japan.
Right.
And we kind of go, we know where this is heading.
And for people who don't understand the Berlin Wall, that is like going to 42nd Street and literally putting up a wall between both sides of New York. It's split.
And having 2 completely different ideologies running.
Rules. It's one country with 2 different systems going, depending on where you sit.
That hate each other.
It is the ideological center of, listen, we're already in the Cold War now, right? Like, I think the day after Berlin falls.
Oh, the day after Yalta.
Yeah.
I think
it's done because Stalin always saw, I think he was told by Lenin, like, basically communism is going to be a fight. Like, we're going to have to fight the capitalists. You know what I mean? Like, it's that idea that the workers rise up against the capitalists and
Yeah. Marx is always described as a bloodless coup, but
Yes.
Lenin realized that it was
Thank you.
supposed, it was going to be more because he actually fought a civil war, the whites and the reds win. And then Stalin grew up in that trajectory, and Britain and America intervened in that war as well. So he knew that they were not communist friendly.
Yeah.
And after the Yalta conference, especially with FDR just going, no, you can't do that. And Churchill smoking a cigar going,
Well,
yeah, we don't like you. Basically. But
I don't know how you feel about, obviously you guys are big FDR fans. I mean, your podcast is called FDR's Wheelchair. I don't know what would have happened if he didn't run that last term. But I mean, he was so sick, and he kept it very secret from everybody.
Well,
even Truman, nobody knew he was that sick. And
we kind of we actually did an episode of this. Well, he had a coup d'etat with Eleanor Roosevelt, who ran the country for 3 months.
Yeah, because he can only work like 4 hours a day, they said, and he was like gone
with Eleanor's help. Yeah.
And he just wasn't even there. I mean, you could see at Yalta, like he is skinny and old. Like all of a sudden out of nowhere, it feels like.
There is a good book about Yalta. I can't remember the title right now, but it describes Stalin dealing with Churchill. He thought Churchill was kind of a buffoon a little bit, but he was scared of Roosevelt, even in his impaired state, because Roosevelt saw the entire picture.
Yeah.
And yeah, Roosevelt was sick and whatnot, and Eleanor helped him in his final days, especially those 3 months when he was really sick. But he was very scared of the United States because he knew what he was doing with the so let me rephrase this. So Stalin saw what he was doing with the Soviet Union, how he was industrializing and making these rapid gains so quickly. He saw that in the United States, and he saw the United States was going to become the world superpower. And he saw in Roosevelt that idea of thinking. He understood Roosevelt from his own perspective. He thought Churchill was like, you're the United Kingdom, you're blustering, you're just hanging on. But the United States is the real threat.
It's true.
Especially after Yalta.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had to be able to see, I mean, England lost basically all of its territories after that war. They had no money. They had nothing left to give. So they lost everything they had. Same thing with France too, but
all the superpowers did.
And that's where everything changed. It's funny because that's where you get a lot of the civil rights in America. Nobody realizes that it's related to colonialism in a lot of ways, because in the 50s and the late 40s, we watched all these countries rise up in Africa and all these outposts. And
when the Europeans left, yeah.
That's what left. That kind of screwed Africa, but that actually contributes to the rising sentiment here with civil rights. Like they watched all these places rise up. So this was an interesting side note. Like it all connects.
It does connect. And war has a way of really accelerating social movements.
Yeah.
Because it no matter what happens to a country at war, it weakens it.
Yeah.
So that establishment becomes weaker. Their arguments become weaker. And depending on how well or badly that they do in the war, no matter what happens, it becomes weaker. So social movements have more of a way of negotiating with the government, because government, like if you're at war, you're going, I'm focusing on the war.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah.
Fine.
Like, oh
fine. Have it.
Just have this. Jeez. Yeah.
I mean, you see that with Vietnam as well.
I was going to say Vietnam plays such a role in a lot of it. I did one on 68. I did it with Mr. Beat and Danny, but we talk about how weird Vietnam, this is going to get totally off topic. It's like, it was such an albatross for Lyndon B. Johnson. Like, think about everything that man accomplished, and you would think he would be like next to your Mount Rushmore. But he always had Vietnam. I mean, he won. He obviously he came in because of Kennedy, so he served 2 years, but he won in a landslide in 64. And then he went to the point where he didn't accept the nomination in 68. Yeah. He was so unpopular. This is a guy who passed like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security,
civil liberties,
civil rights. Yep. He signed off on was it the first student? I think he did do the first student loans in 1965.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, those partly inspired from all the GI Bill stuff because we gave money to GIs, to boomers, kids and stuff. And then they, did whatever. But, yeah, he did that in 1965. And yet he's like, he's probably like, I guess, considered middle of the road because of Vietnam. I mean, you're right, though. War taints things. Even look at the Russian conflicts in Ukraine and stuff. I mean, a lot of that goes back. I mean, it goes back really far. Don't get me wrong. It goes back centuries. But Putin going into these countries, like going in and trying to take it, his justification is one, he had NATO all the time at his doorstep, even when they weren't needed anymore. And he also just started invading countries when George Bush was busy in the Middle East.
Yeah, we were busy in 2 wars, busy in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yeah.
He took on the Chechens under the guise of his own war on terror.
Yeah,
and these other countries.
Because that was a seen as a war on Muslims, which we were, as a country, we were like, yeah, get those Muslims,
get those bad Muslims. We don't dislike all Muslims, obviously. We like Christians better, but
we like the Christian Muslims. So, and then he went into Georgia, and we kind of went, don't do that.
What were we gonna do? You know what I mean? We're like,
exactly.
I just remember reading George Bush quote when he went into like Georgia, and he goes, "This is not how foreign policy is done in the 21st century." And I'm like, did anybody catch that? Like, what?
There's a lot of George Bush quotes about foreign policy that
I say it all the time. The best thing that ever happened to George W. Bush was President Trump. Like,
oh my God, yeah.
Rewrote George Bush in a way. He's like an elder statesman now.
Yeah.
Like he was.
It's remarkable how this war criminal, and all presidents are war criminals, by the way.
Yeah, they are.
But this egregious war criminal who invaded a country because they wanted to go into Iran eventually to capture their oil and to destabilize the Middle East, got away with it because you can grab people by the pussy. Yeah. That's how he got away with it.
Yeah. No, it's true. Anybody who doesn't see that, like, they talked about Iran for a long time until just shit didn't go right in Iraq. So he did the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So that was 2021. And Taibbi wrote about this, I want to say, in Rolling Stone, if he was still with them. He wrote about it somewhere, and he was basically saying what we're talking about. He goes, everybody got real happy because he basically took a backhand at Trump and the January 6th people. He said something about terrorists, both foreign and domestic, and he put like a stamp on it. And they're like, who was it? It was one of the movie guys. Somebody goes, he tweeted like, that's a real president. And meanwhile, he was like, for fucking years, having a conniption anytime he saw President Bush on TV before that. But like, just the way he's been rewritten by Donald Trump is like the most fascinating thing on the planet to me.
It is weird because Trump didn't really do anything.
He created a lot of animosity, and George Bush killed a lot more people.
Oh my God.
Donald
Yeah.
Trump ever did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's funny.
Well, what I think what Donald Trump did was he split the country with culture wars.
Yeah.
So every time you say anything about anything, it shows what side you are on. And I think that creates a lot more polarization.
Yeah. So I always wanted to do an episode about him because he's kind of fascinating with that. I kind of snuck this into my TikTok thing, but I always say, like, we're living in George W. Bush's world. We just don't know it.
I think we're living in Dick Cheney's world.
Well, that's it too. But I mean, the day after 9/11, he had like a 90% approval rating. He has the highest approval rating of all time. I mean, higher than like FDR after Pearl Harbor. You know what I mean? Like, he's the highest approval rating of all time. And he had the whole world, like every civilized country on earth, even in the Middle East, countries we had problems with, were like, no, we back you. Like, we back you. And so there was like a real chance to do something amazing, and he blew it for Iraq. Like, he just blew everything up in this country. Like, I always say, like, he helped foment a lot of the polarization, and people don't really think about that because he had everything together. And I always wonder if Gore was there, what we would have done. What would have happened?
Did he have the House and Senate too? I think he did.
I don't. He might have. I think he got it though I think he got it after,
maybe
because he was
okay.
That was early. He's only in office, I think, from 9 months. Yeah, he gets in January, so he's only in office 9 months.
So he would have gotten it.
I think he got them in the midterms because of everything.
Yeah,
but like he just took it and decided that he was going to try to liberate. I don't know what his idea was. At the time, I always thought like, well, he's trying to like liberate the Middle East, I guess. But you can't bring democracy. You can't force democracy on somebody else. Like, they have to take it.
Not in the way that he did it. I mean, you take Alexander the Great, who invaded the Middle East and then brought what they call Alexanderism or Hellenism.
He got stopped in Afghanistan, by the way, didn't he?
No, he didn't get stopped anywhere. He died of malaria.
Oh, okay.
But he took India. He didn't quite make it to Afghanistan. No, but he did not get stopped.
Okay, he just died.
He died at 36. But he brought what they call Alexanderism or Hellenism to that province, and his generals took over. But George Bush could have done something like that, of bringing good without invading.
That's what I mean. Like, he had influence. Like, influence is very strong, is so much stronger to me than occupation and militarism.
Exactly. He could have done something very good. He could have unleashed the U.S. military to bring aid and good and infrastructure and all the things that set up a society to be equal and fair. He could have brought to without invading, and he did not.
Yeah.
He chose to invade.
That's where, so I started to realize that, like, later on, and then just like reading, like, I got so into the history of everything and looking at the web of all this stuff that I realized that too. I was like, you know what? It's, like, America had like, obviously before World War I and World War II and stuff. I mean, we were more like, well, I mean, we did some shit in South America, so I'll take that back. But
South America, Mexico, North Africa.
But we were an ideal at some point, right? Like, I mean, we were different than the other countries.
We were
in the
trying,
world.
that's for sure.
I mean, we got a little.
we weren't the European colonists.
Yes.
That everyone was used to.
Yeah.
We were American colonists. Nobody knew before.
We did shit for business like sugar and stuff. That's just good old
bananas.
capitalism.
Yeah.
Bananas is another one. Yeah. Capitalism. It's a little different. Whatever. I think I'm thinking of Genghis Khan, by the way. I think he got stopped in Afghanistan. I just remember nobody's been able to tame. The Russians try to go in there. Like, nobody can.
Genghis Khan didn't get stopped. He died as well. Kublai Khan.
But didn't he
got stopped?
I thought he got control of it, like, temporarily, and then
he got a control of a lot of
was rebelled by them or whatever. I mean, he might have died in the meantime. This is like getting beyond me. Like, that type of history. I like know a little bit, but then I get
the British conquered it and they got repelled.
Yeah, technically we were in there. I mean, everybody was in there for a while with us, over there. And then,
well, in fuck, I forget the year.
You can't say we got repelled. It's just
18
payment.
Yeah, that's the problem. Shit, it's like the red coat area where they Britain actually went in there because of a grudge. They went into Afghanistan to like fuck up this leader, and I'm not telling the history very well, but they went in there, they fucked him up, and then they were like, "Yeah, fuck this place, let's go."
Can I just say though, like, I think we deserve a lot of the shit we get from other countries, right? Like, I understand where it comes from, but sometimes when I hear like English people or Britain talking shit, I'm like, yeah, look at your own history, motherfucker. Like, what are you talking about? You're way worse.
Let's go there. Israel, Palestine.
That's what I mean.
Britain.
Like,
India and Pakistan, Britain. The Chinese, their communist government and the way they're fractured, Britain.
Yeah.
Opium War.
Yeah. No, the Middle East is all fucked up because it's
Africa.
Yeah,
the entire continent of Africa, Britain. South America, Britain.
That's what I mean. Every time they talk shit, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Get out of here.
They fought a war against Argentina in the 1970s because of an island, because they couldn't just let go of the colonial power. The Falkland Wars.
Oh, yeah. They also got us to do some dirty work for them in Iran. Yeah. Right? Operation Ajax or whatever.
Ajax, yeah. And
that was cool.
The supplying of Sidewinder missiles to England to attack the Argentinian government. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what was a prelude to the Iran-Contra controversy. Britain.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
So how that ties into Japan in World War II.
Fucking Britain.
Britain didn't help us.
I know.
Britain was like, yeah, help us, we'll help you. Again, it always comes down, I'm starting to see something here. I'm starting to see a lot. I think we figured something out. That's how it ties together, by the way.
They couldn't help us because they were decimated, but they had ties in China, which helped us with the Chinese army. And then you had the formation of the Tiger Air Force, which helped bomb Japan, which was trained by British Air Force and was a help in dropping the bomb. So that's how Britain ties into dropping the bomb.
I will tie Britain
Nagasaki
to them a little bit. Well, Britain and France, because so here's the other thing, right? Now people are going to start looking whatever, but there's a lot of racism that back then against the Japanese, more so than against
the Germans. Entire posters.
The Germans, it's not the same. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was a point they were treated as like just subhuman, but Japan had always wanted to be a player on the world stage, and they did back the Allies in World War I. And then they were shut out of the Treaty of Versailles, which obviously went really well for everything in the world after. But part of the reason they became such a military force was because they were like, forget this, like people are going to respect us from now on. And then they decided they were going to take over Asia. So thanks, Britain.
Yeah, France.
I didn't expect this to get so anti-British.
Oh, I lived in England for almost 16 years. I'll be.
Oh, really?
I'll be as anti-British as they get.
That's funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know you said you were over there. Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Were you in like London? Where were you?
I was in the north in Yorkshire.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'll crap on them as much as I want.
I'm part Irish, so I'm allowed to crap on them too. And I have a little Scottish in me somewhere.
Scottish, yeah.
So
yeah.
Scotsman. I only know that through like the DNA testing though. Like, nobody ever told us that.
I've never done the DNA testing.
Now I can't murder anybody, so that sucks.
Just saying. Yeah.
That's like everybody. It's got to be a crime of passion if I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
And how that ties into Japan, again, they were very passionate after.
I had a whole thing that was going on, and he derailed it.
Sorry.
Shanghai and Singapore. So Singapore was a big British port. They got kicked out by the Japanese. The Royal Navy got kicked out of the South Asian theater. Americans came in. They started to dominate Manila, Philippines, and Malaysia. And we never really let them back in. So that whole trade network, again, came back to America, excluded Great Britain. And Great Britain started losing their colonies around the world. In the 50s, that's when their Great Depression really started happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah, World War II really fucked up England, Great Britain, and the Scottish and the Irish, especially because when a country as powerful as Great Britain gets beat down, they tend to beat down the people that are next to them, Ireland. And then you have the rise of the IRA.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, it worked out for us, I guess, for a while.
It did. It still is. The U.S. is the main lone superpower. But we still keep trying to beat down civil rights as much as we can.
It worked out. But so I'll rephrase that. It worked out for, I guess, the American people after. I mean, like, that's what I laugh about.
The rich American people. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was a point in time, though, like from 48 to 73, like the economic output in this country where everybody actually had a little bit of a share of it was like probably the most in history at that time. Like, you could be a mechanic and have 2 kids and a house and a car and a TV and like not have any debt. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, you could live a good life at least that point. Then,
yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah.
So, but you know, a lot of people don't like to talk about this. Nobody thinks about this like in the 50s, right? Like, obviously our factories were awesome. Our exporting was awesome. Like, we had to rebuild Europe and rebuild Asia. Like, we rebuilt countries. Like, we were all there was. And then, so everybody could work, obviously. And then
that's
a 90, like, unions were powerful because it was like, yeah, everybody's making money. So who gives a shit? We'll share it with you. You know, like, unions were so powerful. Like, you couldn't, it's not like you were going to go overseas at that point to get your products done cheap.
That's a great way of putting it. We rebuilt Europe rebuilt Asia.
I think that's why people like get pissed and they don't really realize it when they talk about like other countries getting ahead of us. It's like they were kind of bombed out and then like they have better infrastructure than us now.
So we nuked them and then rebuilt them. And now they're.
Yeah, we kind of like put them back together better again, you know? We don't have problems. We don't have like problems where we get bombed over here and have to rebuild shit. We have those seas covering us that sends it, but Jesus, we got to start a world war and destroy the rest of the earth if we want to keep that economy rolling.
Yeah, and Canada's not much of a threat.
Yeah, there's really nobody. It's not a lot to threaten us, but yeah, no, but obviously, like, it worked out for us after the World War because, like, yeah, we're the sole superpower. I mean, we had the factories before, and that was like one of the things. It's amazing how quickly this country mobilized because, like, not a lot of people think about that. We used to, even after World War I, we basically disband the army.
Yeah.
We disband the army. We have a little bit of military, but it's nothing. Like, what we had to do so quick in that war effort to turn it around is crazy.
Well, one of the quotes is, we wanted 60,000 airplanes to bomb Germany in a year. We made 120,000.
Yeah, it's
like how do you compete with that? You have the British talk about the American army as they were a rich man's army because like, oh, something broke down. They brought a new one in. That was during World War II because our material assets were just so easy to get. That was even going over an ocean.
Yeah. Even like, that's the thing with like the Russians too, right? The Russians just had so many people that they threw at the problem.
Yeah.
They're huge. It's some way. I mean, they helped us so much because there was so many less of our people that had to do that type of dirty work too.
Without the Russians coming over on the east, D-Day might have never happened. It might have gone through Italy.
Right. So, I mean, you could see it now in their warfare. They're still like a weird military. They're like an old school military. They're still like World War II, like just going in with tanks and people. Where we're like, we don't even need people anymore. We just have like drones. We fucking send missiles from across the sea. Yeah, like it's silly. We're on an aircraft carrier. We'll send a missile. We're not sending people out there.
Yeah.
We're not even going to put people in airplanes anymore. We're just going
to. Yeah. Nobody wants to do that.
No. And you'll see with the Ukraine stuff. I mean, well, I read like, it's kind of fucked up, dude. It's like a testing ground for all these like AI weapons. Like all those weapons manufacturers are just like, hey, cool, let's try these on real people. You know what I mean? It's like,
I fully believe it. I think it's a Pentagon's playground right now.
Yeah.
The Bradleys are making Ukrainian tanks look like fucking child's play. And I was reading another article yesterday that the U.S. is coming out with a new tank, the M1E3, that is going to have missiles that are launched from its turrets that can take out helicopters.
It's crazy.
And like, what the?
But it's like, why do we even? So it's like, you know, nukes and stuff, right? It's interesting when you look at it, right? So the reason why we got involved trying to get the nuclear bomb is because the Germans figured out nuclear fission. Nobody thought about it like the first second. You know, they were like, wow, that's a lot of power. And then it's like, it took a couple of physicists like a week or two to be like, that could be like pretty big bomb.
The German scientists, Jewish scientists were like, yeah, this could be a
big problem.
Yeah, this could be a big problem. And then Hitler, he actually said it's a Jewish science problem. So the Jewish scientists were like, oh, we're going off to America. And there were Jewish scientists in Chicago that were able to carry out nuclear fission.
Right.
And they created a big bunch of goop.
Otto
like,
Hahn. Sorry. I was trying to remember his name. Otto Hahn, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember the
exact thing. Meitner or somebody. Yeah, but I know it was, I think Hahn was definitely the guy. I'm trying to look it up.
Yeah, I can't remember the names. I think it's Hahn. And they created this big goop of nuclear fission, and they were like, oh, we can make a bomb out of this. And that's when Einstein got a hold of the papers, and he wrote FDR, like, you got to make a bomb, motherfucker.
Yeah. Like,
before they did.
A total pacifist, extremely anti-war, but he understood if Hitler had the bomb, what would happen.
Yeah. And oh God, I can't remember the Nazi scientist, but he was one of the leaders of a proponent of nuclear. Oh my God. But there's theories that he sabotaged the research into it. I wish I could remember his name, because he understood that it could make a bomb, and he wasn't actually a real Nazi. But
I heard that. I know.
He edged, because there was a component in the nuclear bombs that the Americans used granite, and that was the key, and he was going towards heavy water. Right. So he kept pushing him to go to heavy water, which wasn't the key. And when Oppenheimer learned of that, he was like, they fucked up. And that was like one of the things where America was able to get the bomb before Germany did.
We also spent a lot of fucking money to get that bomb that Germans weren't willing to.
They didn't have the resources.
We didn't realize it until years later that the amount of money he put in, but he had a few different issues, right? I mean, obviously he was killing Jewish people and Jewish scientists, or they were fleeing the country to come to us in the West, the guys who probably could have really helped. I mean, how many German physicists are on the Manhattan Project? I mean, it's
unreal. And then after the war,
Wow.
Operation Paperclip.
Yeah, you could. Story of does a good one on that. But yeah, it's like the whole Cold War is sort of like that too. We'd like. Eventually, the Russians did catch up to us at some point, but like at one point,
Because they had spies in
the
Manhattan Project.
Well, yeah, the one physicist was giving them the
Rosenbergs.
Yeah,
the Rosenbergs.
The Rosenbergs, yes. Well, that's what they said when Truman talked to him at the Potsdam meeting. Truman just kind of like tried to drop it, like, I have a weapon of immense destruction that could, end the war. And Stalin just kind of said, "Oh, good." Stalin knew what it was and he was trying to get it. You know what I mean? Like, he thought it was going to scare the shit out of Stalin. If he dropped it, it was like a flex move. But Stalin was like, "Oh, good. Yeah, that's cool. We'll come down the mountain anyway, right now instead." But, I think we spent $2 billion, but that's 1940s money. $2 billion in the 1940s on a secret. That's the other thing too. It's like, how do you put that? Like, you blow a hole in the budget. You're like, it's just $2 billion.
I guess it's just war money,
Yeah, it probably is all just washed. We were spending so much fucking money at that point. I mean, it's part of what helped us get out of the depression was all.
It's the reason we got out of depression. It's the reason the world got out of depression because the American economy kicked off and, like you said, built back up Europe and Asia.
But like even in the 50s and 60s with like all the Red Scare stuff, we had so many more nukes at the time than the Russians.
That's why
the ICBMs and stuff. Like, we had so many more than them. We figured out that they were lying at one point. I want to say in like the 60s or 70s when we started doing like, the flyovers and you can actually like.
Oh, the U-2 planes.
U-2 planes and stuff where like they have like 4 intercontinental ballistic missiles and we have like 4,000.
Yeah. After the Korean War, that's when MacArthur wanted to go through China and destroy that. And could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Like you have NATO and you have China, a U.S. China surrounding Russia.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I was thinking of before we got on was like, what if we never dropped the bomb? Would it have been dropped anyway at some point? Like, who would have? Nobody knew the actual after effects of it.
Yeah.
Now it's different because we know.
Would it have been a hot war instead of a cold war with nuclear bombs? Would it the idea of mutual assured destruction, NAD, not been something because we didn't know?
Like we would have popped one off against each other at some point, like, and then been like, "Shit, this was a big deal."
Ooh,
that wasn't good.
That's a lot. Sorry, guys. We didn't fuck you up that much.
Shit. Well, yeah,
possibly.
And now it's like a big club that everybody wants to get into.
Yeah.
Well, you get prestige. You get treated differently if you have one of the bad boys.
For sure. For sure. Like, would we have invaded Iraq if they had nuclear weapons? No.
But Ukraine's a great argument, right?
Remember, they gave up.
They gave it up. Yeah.
Gave it up, and now they're being invaded.
And we put the language was we assured security guarantees. We didn't guarantee them. We assured their security. And that could be really anything. So, but it was crazy at the end of the Cold War when we had a bunch of different countries because they were like, where the fuck are all these nukes? And Ukraine had 47 nukes and they wanted to keep some of them. I take that back. They had 73 nukes, I think, but they were going to give up 40. And America was like, why do you need 33 nukes? And they're like, so
Victor Boot, where did those nukes go?
Did you read up on our history? Those guys are always fucking with us for 300 years. They keep coming in here and trying to take us over. But they gave them up. So, I mean, there's just really.
Did Belarus have nukes at one point? I don't think they did.
No. I mean, some of those areas I know definitely did, and they just did a lot of bargaining with them. But Ukraine was like a holdout, and they're right at this point.
Yeah.
That's another issue of NATO expansion. Like,
yeah, I'm
not saying, like, listen, I actually side with funding Ukraine against Russia just because I don't think you could. There's a lot of back and forth on all that stuff, but like, I'm for funding them. Not that I love the whole proxy war idea, but him going into Ukraine, like, that was going to be a huge issue. Poland and all these countries. Poland's always had an issue with them, but like, these countries didn't have NATO protection before Ukraine.
Right.
And he wants empire. Like, his legacy is to look for, he wants the empire back.
Yeah. No, it wasn't even an excuse. He just said words about Nazis. I'm for funding Ukraine because it's the cheapest, easiest way to stop Russia.
Yes. Well, that's,
And they're not our friends. I mean, we can get the whole debate about Russia subverting elections and stuff. They're not our friends, and I think they should be stopped. And Putin is a fucking tyrant, and we need to stop him. And the easiest, best way we can do right now is give Ukrainians weapons, because they're doing a fantastic job.
Nobody thought they were, because remember, they like walked into Georgia and it was like, they hardly had to like do anything.
Yeah.
But Ukraine was really underestimated, I guess. There's always been that fighting spirit, though, of them with Russia. Yeah.
One of the best videos I saw was it's a Ukrainian elderly lady. She looks to us like 90, but in Ukraine, she's probably like 50. She's talking to a Russian soldier, and she's handing him sunflower seeds. Mm-hmm. And Russian soldier like, what the fuck? She's like, these grow here. I hope your body grows into this. And that's a grandmother. It's like, tough. Whoa, like, I don't want to invade those people.
Yeah. Well, that's the other, right? They have like a conscription army over there. So again, it's like, who wants to deal with that shit? Like, you saw Vietnam, right? It's much easier to brainwash, a standing army who's ready to fight than to do that kind of shit. But
exactly, yeah, it's a people that do not want to be taken over, and that is in their own territory, and that's the hardest army to ever take over.
Yeah. Something to fight for like that.
And then you have the money coming from America. You have weapons pouring in, the German tanks and the Swedish tanks, and you have all this stuff coming in that the Russian military it's overmatched. Yes, they have the numbers, but damn, trying to take someone over in their own territory is hard. Yeah.
Well, I guess, my father is like, I can't believe he doesn't like tactical nuke them or something, because he's crazy. But
he could.
Yeah,
but the response,
China doesn't back them, and then all the other countries don't back them that are buying their oil. Since
I think you hit the nail on the head with China not backing a tactical nuclear. It was like, no, because we were dealing with Taiwan. Let's not bring that into the equation because we'll be obliterated. And then if they tactically nuke Ukraine, I don't think NATO would just be idle. I think Finland and Sweden and Norway would be like, no, we're nuking them. Fucking nuke them. I think that would, and then Finland just joining NATO and stuff. And then you have all that. I think if you did that, the world would be over.
Yeah. Well, we're like, I always say it's a scary time. I just look at a lot of history, and it's like, you see a lot of, you saw Germany's far right party one. That's the first time since the Nazis.
I
see a lot of, but you get this shit. I think Mr. Beat talked about it with us a little bit, right? Like, there's too much economic instability, and then there's just, what is it when people have more than the other people? Economic
disparity.
Thank you. Holy shit. I couldn't change from like nuclear weapons to economic. I couldn't change my mind from that.
Unconditional surrender.
When you get like disparity, like we do, wealth inequality, there it is. When you get wealth inequality the way we have it, this is kind of what happened in the 30s, much worse in the 30s. Although, like, it doesn't, nobody, I don't know. You just have this.
Nobody really talks about it. Nobody really explains the situation.
Right. There's just so much like wealth inequality that people start looking to other types of leaders. It always repeats itself. It's always like a guy who's going to fix it. I mean, Hitler fixed a lot of shit for Germany. Mussolini did the same shit. Like all these guys, and it's always like the same thing, right? Like immigrants or a certain type of people take our jobs.
Well, shit, FDR did the same thing, just not in this despotic way that the European leaders did. I mean, he pumped a lot of money into the economy, and you can say that's right or wrong. But yeah, he was, that's why he won 4 fucking elections.
No, it's true. He did. In fact, when he stopped pumping money into the economy because people were starting to get like a little nervous about it, I think in 36, we went backwards again.
Yeah. 36, 37, 38. Yeah.
We went backwards, but we weren't spending the same because he kind of was like, they were trying to pull his purse strings and he was getting a lot of shit on it. But
Congress was definitely stop.
And then what happened? I mean, look at it. Look at the spending in World War II, and
that's what war does.
Yeah, it's good business. War is good business in some way. But yeah, I mean, all that spending definitely helped out. But you're right, I didn't think of it that way. Like FDR was just not as racist and hateful about it. I mean, like,
well, he was kind of racist.
I'll take it back. Yeah, that's true. He did do a few things.
There was the camps with the Japanese, and, going against the Irish pretty good. But I think he did it much more familial. So like he was trying to help the American public as a whole rather than saying that he wasn't eugenic about it. Like Hitler and Mussolini. So he was like, we're helping America, except for the Japanese. Whereas Hitler and Mussolini were like, it's the Jews that are a problem. And maybe the dark-haired Germans that are the problem.
People forget, or they don't know. They don't live through it. It's like every generation loses it a little bit. Like the people in World War II, their kids heard the stories every day, probably.
So we should invest more in education to teach them about it?
Oh, that's taxpayer money. I mean, do you want me to tax a rich person? Fucking know anything about the economy?
Trickle down, motherfucker.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going anymore on this.
So dropping the bomb on Japan. Dropping the bomb in Japan.
To be fair, you warned everybody yesterday in a tweet that we talked.
Yes.
Just to be fair. Dave's going to listen to this and be like, did they agree with it? Did they not? I could have yelled so many times at them.
Be so mad.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so let's go back to Japan. I have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
We have the benefit of hindsight, and I don't think they should have done it. However, there are arguments that can say it stopped further escalation of atomic warfare because everyone saw the devastation. So
Right.
mutually assured destruction. They actually saw it for their own eyes.
So the generals who talked about that, that there's not enough credit given to, it's hard to say credit, but there's not enough credit given to the peace that ensued because of dropping the atomic bombs. I think that's kind of a fucking weird thing to say. I get it's what you're saying, right? Like once we saw the devastation and looking into it, we realized that, well, once you set a certain amount off, you're fucked. Like the whole world is just fucked.
Oh, there is a general that in medieval times that said peace through devastation. Was it Attila?
I don't know.
I can't remember, but yeah,
you could tell me
make
it, and I'll believe it. You can
yeah,
make up a
okay.
name and
There
I'll
you
be
go.
like, yeah, that guy sounds familiar.
But oh no, Sherman, General Sherman in the Civil War said, "War is hell, and the more that we make it hell, the more peace we'll have."
Well, he definitely believed that.
Yeah, yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know about Sherman's march, holy shit.
Yeah, General Sherman.
No, you're right. Well, didn't he say something like, so people used to watch these fights happen in the Civil War. They'd watch the soldiers line up.
And have a little picnic.
They'd have a picnic on the top of the hill. And he's like, are you kidding me? He said, the only way this is going to end is if we bring it to the people and show them like what, total warfare, total war. That's what he brought to them. What is that? The March to the Sea, I think?
Yeah, exactly.
March to the Sea. Yeah.
March to the Sea.
Just burning down people's houses. Just
fucked up Atlanta.
Just Atlanta. He just burned it down. Yeah, he did. But
the Sherman knots, where he would take the railroads and tie them into Sherman, like
crazy.
He'd wrap it around, and it's called a Sherman knot.
That's ludicrously crazy and terrible. And I'm laughing. I don't know. I don't, like I said, so like my opinion's weird. Like I think I understand it from the benefit of hindsight, and I understand the point. It probably, I mean, you're right. It's a war crime. It definitely was, but
I can't say with specificity if I wasn't in that spot I would not drop the bomb.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't think I can.
I'd like to say I would, but I don't know if I would not have. I think I would have dropped the bomb, to be honest.
I think I would have definitely been one of the people who was pro, and I would have, I think so. Just because nobody knew anything. I think, like, if we knew the after effects, we might have thought a little differently. Yeah.
I'd like to think that given my situation, I would have dropped the bomb off the coast and be like, look what I can do. But again, that's with hindsight and everything.
Do you think there was a point we could have dropped it on the Germans?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
I think we get it.
So, because
we
we
already fucking destroyed
honestly, that's some of the thing I guess I was thinking about too. I'm like,
I think we would drop
fire bombings like over time is nasty. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like every day, all the time, just pounding everybody.
I think we could have dropped on Warsaw to warn the Soviets before they got there.
We could have.
Just be like, don't fuck with us.
No, that's true, because let's face it. I mean, if Russia isn't a part of this thing, I don't know if we drop it. Like, if they weren't as intent as they were, I think maybe we just blockade them.
Oh, possibly. Yeah.
Like, how long are they going to last at that point? I mean, more of the land invasion. We were pressed for time with the Russians. We didn't want them in there.
I think that's a good point. Because we became scared of the Russians because of what they became. And we had this military in the nuclear weapon. Yeah. I think dropping on Warsaw as they were invading and just be like, back the fuck off.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they wanted to come into the Pacific Theater. Yeah. Absolutely.
Boy, how messed up would everything be if we dropped one though in Germany? Can you imagine, like, so many different things. There's little changes. Well, that's not a little change, but so many changes. The world looks
Or like drop out in Vienna or somewhere like that.
Because I don't think anybody cared about the devastation at that point. More of the issue is where they did it, like how many civilian casualties there were. But I think more people, I think what changed too, the after effects, like birth defects and cancer and, how many people paid a price, how many generations had to pay for what the generation before did. I mean, it's not fair.
Yeah. Or how how Russia would consider nuclear weapons going forward. Like, would there be a Chernobyl? Would they be the escalation of nuclear weapons?
Yeah, I feel like though, would there be an escalation?
Or would it have increased? Would have it?
Well, that's what I don't know. I don't know if somebody just would have been like, because nobody had ever used it. I mean, this is a little anecdotal, I guess, but it's like nobody ever used it, so it's like, hey, everybody, just try to get one. And somebody would have dropped it on somebody and been like, oh shit.
Or if China got it and then used it in Vietnam.
Shit.
And then the US would be like, you think that's a nuclear weapon? Watch this.
You ever hear of the hydrogen bomb? Like, I got nowhere else to go, so I think that's it for me. I think we've been out for hours. We were talking for 45 minutes an hour before this thing started.
No. I've nowhere to go to.
Oh, so. I think we covered all of history, so that's good.
All of history, yeah.
All of history has been solved.
Oh.
Smith would be proud. Smith from Historia would be very proud.
Dave would be proud too.
Yeah. Smith's going to text me when he hears there's a bunch of corrections. You were wrong.
Actually.
That was 1953. It's like, all right. It's a podcast, all right? I can make a mistake here.
Right.
So why don't you plug yourself?
All right. Well, I'm Brandon, the co-host of FDR's Wheelchair. You can email us at FDR's Wheelchair Podcast at gmail.com. You can come join the fun on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter at FDR_WC_pod because that's how I have to be on Twitter.
Yeah.
So come join that. But yeah, please email us with ideas that you have, questions that you have. We love that. So
I will just say this. One of my favorite podcasts I listen to, also a member of the Unfiltered Studios podcast network.
Yep.
Wanted to throw that out there. Check them out. We're part of the network. All different types of podcasts for everyone. There's sports, movies, political stuff, news and commentary. I don't know what the hell my show is. I guess it's a variety show. I have no clue.
You're with Jay Burke, man. That's all you need.
If you're into whatever the hell this is, that's there too. But yeah, man, there's a lot to check out there. But man, you're always welcome back. Thank you.
Yep. It's unconditional surrender.
I am unconditionally surrendering. I unconditionally surrendered that podcast about an hour and 15 minutes into it. All right, man. Thank you.
Hi, buddy.
I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day today and listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more about the topics discussed in this episode, check out our show notes at my website, jburkshow.podbean.com. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, or wherever you enjoy your favorite podcast so you never miss out. You can also follow us at JBurke Show on Twitter and Instagram and JBurke17 on TikTok for the latest updates and going-ons behind the scenes. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review. It helps us improve and grow the show, and each and every one of you has such an impact on that, and I can't thank you enough. Join us next time, and remember,
it won't always be a straight line, but take the journey and escape a while for thoughtful excursions into the world of ideas across media, politics, technology, pop culture, and all realms of civic life.
You're listening to the Ruth J. Burke Show.